Sri Lanka is a society governed by shame. Shame is defined as a painful feeling of distress from becoming aware of a moral or interpersonally foolish or harmful activity. In psychological terms, shame is seen as a very damaging emotion. Many Sri Lankans have a preoccupation with avoiding shame and saving face. This is why one of the most common statements you hear when somebody is complaining about someone's behavior is lajjanad or kisima lajjak nahi, shameless fellow. You may have heard these things very often growing up in Sri Lanka. Think about how often you may have heard these statements yourself when somebody is expressing disapproval within a Sri Lankan context. Many Sri Lankans are preoccupied with avoiding shame and saving face, which means that the perceived shame attributable to a particular decision is often seen as an important aspect of any particular decision within a Sri Lankan cultural context. Shame is such an important part of Sri Lankan culture that one study in 2019 even identified shame as a valuable concept. That is to say, Sri Lankans found shame to be an important aspect of what it meant to be a morally good person, according to that study. This is evident in the saying Lajja Bayata Hadana, which is often used to refer to upbringing in Sri Lanka. It's also used to describe what is perceived as good or effective parenting practices. So to be raised to be ashamed of oneself in a Sri Lankan context is often viewed as a positive quality. It is also commonly believed in Sri Lanka that shame isn't just a personal issue, but that one's shameful behaviors reflect badly on one's own ethnic, religious, cultural group, and even family. This further increases the pressure of needing to avoid shame. This obsession with shame is a problematic issue in Sri Lanka. Let me explain why I think this is the case. Firstly, ideas are often evaluated in Sri Lanka based on the amount of shame that they might generate as opposed to the merit of a particular idea. For example, to be open about a particular idea or to be authentic in one's expression of that idea is often viewed as shameful. The effect of this is that a person's ideas and their expression of their ideas can become stifled and their ideas themselves watered down to a level that is supposed to conform to community expectations. This means that many Sri Lankans struggle to think about or make decisions that don't conform to community expectations. This emphasis on shame also prevents out-of-the-box or creative thinking, ultimately stifling their authenticity and their ideas. The heavy emphasis on shame also means that many Sri Lankans are forced to be secretive about their activities. This is particularly problematic when it comes to romantic or sexual activities. This emphasis on shame and the shameful act of talking about relationships also means that many Sri Lankan youth have very little guidance when it comes to relationships, sexuality, and issues of that nature. A lot of issues surrounding relationships and abuse also goes unaddressed because of this shame. Many unwanted pregnancies result from this paradox. The attitude towards shame that many Sri Lankans hold also prevents them from being able to address interpersonal issues, particularly with individuals who have hurt them. This is because being open to discussing how someone has hurt you or your feelings about those issues is seen as a shameful act. Being open about one's feelings is seen to be a shameful admission of weakness in Sri Lankan society. And the consequence of this is that many Sri Lankans conceal their emotions and the way they feel. The result is often damaging mental health consequences. So, for example, instead of seeking help, many Sri Lankans would consider suffering in silence as the less shameful and more acceptable solution to a mental health issue or to feeling hurt. The shame associated with being open about one's feelings can be so intense in Sri Lanka that suicide can sometimes be seen as a more socially acceptable and less shameful decision. If you want to know more about Sri Lanka and its mental health issues, I've made a video about this and I'll put the link in the description below. Shame is also weaponized in Sri Lanka. It is used as a way of controlling society's thoughts, emotions, relationships, and decisions. For example, if an individual doesn't conform to the needs and wishes of an authority figure, they are often labeled as being shameless. This weaponization of shame discourages people from being open about their ideas and also their thoughts, thereby stifling critical thinking. This absence of critical thinking due to the shame perceived with having opinions that contradict authority figures means that it's very common in Sri Lanka for people to be inflexible and rigid in their thinking. Finally, the shame associated with interpersonal interactions manifests in another way. Shame can also manifest in terms of obligations. In Sri Lankan culture, refusing a request for assistance is often perceived in a very shameful manner as well, which means that many Sri Lankans often agree to activities or favors or to interactions which they would otherwise have refused if not for the shame associated with it. This obligation to respond favorably often causes a significant amount of resentment to build up in interpersonal relationships. These are some of the ways in which I think shame and the emphasis on being aware of shame and enforcing shame on people can be damaging to Sri Lankan society. I've often encountered the idea that Sri Lankans are inflexible in their thinking, or that they are somehow reluctant to embrace new ideas. I have also seen that many Sri Lankans struggle with enormous amounts of mental health issues, as well as the fact that many Sri Lankans prefer to suffer in silence rather than make their thoughts and feelings known to people around them. In fact, I believe that our obsession with shame is one of the main reasons that Sri Lankans struggle with so many societal issues. As a psychologist, I am deeply aware of how shame can be damaging and harmful to an individual. Reducing our focus on shame is something I believe Sri Lankan society should work towards. I hope that video was useful to you in understanding Sri Lankan culture and the emphasis on shame in Sri Lankan cultural interactions. Please do subscribe and like, as it really helps our little channel out. And please feel free to shamelessly comment down below and let me know your thoughts on shame and the function of shame in Sri Lankan society. Thank you for watching this video.